Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for your stamina to date. I'm here to tell you about Helium 1 and the excitement that project is actually generating at this moment in time. You know all about disclaimers, etc., so I can flash through that. And the real thing about helium is, gentlemen, it's the market. It's the market, stupid. That's what's driving the potential wealth associated with this project. We're in Tanzania, which has recently had the wonderful gift of getting the settlement of the Acacia barrack with the government of Tanzania, which has made it a more, I guess, positive environment for investment. We're with a project there in terms of helium that is a standalone helium project, and that's significant because generally helium is produced as a byproduct from the oil and gas sector. And even this morning in the oil and gas, there was a comment made that the cartel would probably have to reduce the amount of oil being produced because the oil price has gone down as a result of the coronavirus. If that's the case, then there's even less helium produced. So a standalone producer has a significant operational advantage. Helium is quite unique as well in terms of its properties. Apart from its market demand that you'll see in the next slide, it is non-recoverable. Once used, it's gone. It disappears. It's not recyclable. It's finished. So there's a finite amount of it. It's also interesting to note that you cannot really store helium. So the bulk of the helium is stored in the ground, where it starts off from. If you take it away in a sealed container and don't use it within a month, 20% of that helium gas has disappeared. So it is a commodity. Once you get it, you better use it. We're in Rukwa. And that is an interesting location. And it's interesting because one of our supporters is the rather prestigious university called Oxford from the UK. By coincidence, in 2016, Oxford were battling to get helium for their laboratory equipment and decided as a consequence of this, they would do an exercise in understanding where the best likelihood is to find helium in the geology as it's understood worldwide. The conclusion they came to, completely without any input from us, was that the Rukwa Valley was the prime target. So, of course, as a consequence, they've become our best friends going forward. Tier 1 management just talks about us, and of course, anybody who's got any brain in their head would not say otherwise. We're not complete idiots, so read that and believe it. Global strategic, Tier 1 potential. If you're in the mining business, you have to have size. Without size, you are ignored. This is one of the largest standalone helium projects you'll find anywhere globally. That's the demand. You'll see a table there that shows the sort of typical consumption of helium, and it is not party balloons, which people probably expect, but the bulk of it is going into medical facilities like MRI, etc., X-ray machines, and a fair chunk of it going into industry in the form of space rocket craft, etc., because one of the key elements is if you're going to send someone to the moon, you better make sure that your rocket doesn't have any holes in it in terms of weld defects, and helium is one of the best elements to track it with. But you can see there the kind of commodities that are using it, and this next picture as well highlights it in a million different ways. It is it's tomorrow's technology. Today is really what we're saying. It's a real commodity. And the truth is, there isn't enough of it. That's what's been happening in terms of the price and the supply and demand equation. And you can see from that, there just isn't enough. And if you're solely reliant upon the byproduct coming from the Middle East, then you really have to be in cloud cuckoo land, to be quite frank. It is a dangerous place, as I guess most of us know. You want to be in a place that's relatively safe, and I use that word deliberately, and in a non-aligned political environment, which Tanzania is. So if you want to have secure supplies, get yourself involved with this project in Tanzania, and that is what the major industrial gas players are doing. We've had approaches from Air Liquide, Praxair, and Linde, the big guys who supply the acetylene, the hydrogens, the oxygens, etc., and now the helium. The main supplier out of the US was an auction that took place by the Land Management Bank every quarter. In 2017, the Americans said, guys, no more auctions from 2018. True to their word, they closed it in September 2018. That was the last transparent value you could see for helium as a gas. And you can see what it ramped up to, roughly about $250 per 1,000 cubic feet. Since then, people do a pick and pay arrangement, and that is not transparent in any fashion. There is anecdotal evidence that small-scale consumers are paying upwards of $1,000 per CFM. it drives the economic of this project only in one direction, and that is preferentially. There's a wonderful British saying that says, don't have a dog and bark yourself. Well, what I stuck up there is the press releases that come out from a range of newspapers. And those of you who are familiar with the British press, none of them is the Sun. They're actually more prestigious than that. And they're telling you, guys, there isn't enough helium in the marketplace. And when you consider that a chunk of it is going to the medical facilities, something that we demand as being part of our right to look after our health, you better get sorted in terms of helium. But the other part I didn't mention, and I left it to this slide, was it's also strategic. It is built into the American supply-demand strategic elements that have to be considered part of their grouping. And the reason behind that is defense. They are used excessively in terms of the satellites that go up into the space, and we all know what a chunk of these satellites are used for, and it's not just tracking what we're doing in terms of global warming, I beg your pardon. So, there you go. There's what everyone else says about it. We're in Tanzania. We're about 500 k's from Dar es Salaam, paved highway, but it is Dar es Salaam, so 500 k's takes you still 24 hours. The road's hectic. But with the values associated with helium, one of the options that we're looking at is can we transport the helium by helicopter to Dar es Salaam port and get it away? We've picked up the geology. We've spent almost $15 million in the geology to date, which drives us to drill-ready targets. We will be drilling these targets this year by the end of May when the rains have subsided. That's just a little bit of a snapshot that says that's how helium gas is produced, and that's what you're looking for in terms of the structures that hold it. Its characteristics, well, you've got a reasonable idea there, large onshore, helium marketing, pilot plant, et cetera, it's all in there in terms of our project development. We've got multiple targets. We will drill 3 in the month of May, June, July, but there are another 24 targets identified as leads by SRK, the independent engineering group, and by the group from the USA. We have 150 BCF of identified prospective gas resource in the ground. The work program was sufficient. When I passed it in front of people who are much more knowledgeable in the gas environment than I am, they said, guys, why aren't you drilling? You have more than enough indication here to get the drills on the ground and get started. So with that kind of encouragement, we started again back in Tanzania, making sure that the permits needed to get the drilling up and underway were in place. And that is indeed happening. That's the program for growth. You can see there the story where we say we are going to be drilling in the second quarter of this year, completing the third quarter this year. The slightest hint of gas flow. We know that gas is there, and I should have taken a few seconds to mention it. One of the reasons we ended up there is that in the 1950s, the British Geological Society went around looking for hot springs, hydrothermal energy, etc., and they found, bubbling up at the Rukwa Valley, helium gas coming to the surface at 10%. Remember, most of the byproduct runs between 0.1 and 0.3, so 10% is hallelujah time, quite frankly. So for 70 years now, from 1950, repeatedly that's been measured, and we have got that gas consistently coming there. So you know the helium's there. It's just now a case of understanding how quickly it can be released from the reservoirs that are holding it. That will be undertaken during this drilling, and we'll get enough information, I'm sure, to create even more excitement in the marketplace that's there just now. The helium market's not going away. It's there to last. There is going to be more demand, and in some ways, the 7 billion cubic feet of gas that's being used at the moment is being constrained because there just isn't enough. You lift that edge, there's going to be more end users. And really, you have to have supplies of it. We, with 150 BCM sitting in Tanzania at 10% helium, have huge advantage over almost anyone elsewhere in the world. You can get helium as a byproduct, but it's in tough situations, and if the byproduct is a result of the hydrocarbons, those dirty, horrible hydrocarbons that nobody likes in the world today, then you're stuffed in that way as well. We have no hydrocarbons, so from an environmental point of view, people love us as well. The other interesting fact of it is that the gas is composed of 10% helium, 90% nitrogen. So what do you do with the nitrogen once you've liquefied out the helium? You vent it to atmosphere. There is no tailings dam. There is no residue to dispose of. It is one of the better projects from an environmental point of view, which of course is one of the key elements in anything we do going forward in any project. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'll conclude by saying, have a good look at Helium 1. It's fun to be in it, and it's fun to be associated with it from an investment point of view. And then as my friend Lawrence Stefan is here, I'll remind him of the statement that was made by the bishop at his congregation in the church in Cambridge when he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to finish and get the flock out of here." Thanks very much.